Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Evil West. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, Xbox One, PS5, PS4, and PC. Yeah, it's been out for a while, but I just heard about it like 6 months ago, and it sounded interesting. So you play as Jesse Rentier, they pronounce it a bunch of different ways throughout. It's the Old West, and he's part of the Rentier, however you want to say it, agency. I don't know if they're necessarily a government agency or an independent agency or some combination of the two, but they hunt vampires. In America, vampires are known about and they're openly hunted, and they create a bunch of other monsters. And in their hunt for one of the larger, better known vampires, well, they get him and they kind of kick off a whole other situation by getting him. The Institute is attacked and damn near destroyed, and they're kind of on the back foot, but they're going on missions to try and bring down the vampires all the same. And I gotta say, there were some good twists and turns along the way. Overall, I actually liked the story a lot more than I thought I was going to getting into it. Although there are some things that feel a little disjointed. There are things that pop up in cutscenes that you're like, I don't really remember them addressing that in the previous mission, so now it's suddenly important. Okay, interesting. Or there's little conversations that happen in the world around you when you're around the home base. And if you accidentally miss one that was supposed to happen earlier, it makes the next one confusing. And so that could have been done a bit better, I feel like. But the overall story I actually thought was pretty cool, and I enjoyed it. Now we'll move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say about the audio is I think the voiceover work is very well done. I really enjoyed it. I also think the sound effects are very well done, and I enjoyed them. Whether it's the weapons, the creatures, just the world you're in, all of that comes together very well to breathe life into the story and the world. Then of course you got the music, which I think the music is pretty good. Again, it works, but it's not something I'm going to remember and I'm going to run out and buy a soundtrack for. Let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a third-person shooter with RPG elements. The RPG elements are you kill things, you get experience, you level up. Leveling up only really matters for unlocking abilities. It's not like you get more health or more whatever, it's just abilities really. It's gaining perk points essentially. You do have other perks which you buy upgrades, but they feel more like perks than anything. They're very similar. I don't know why you always need two systems, but a lot of games love to have it. For the upgrades, you get cash, and you can just spend it whenever, which I thought was weird because they made it seem like it was gonna be an in-between mission thing, but then it ended up just you could spend the cash whenever you want to buy the upgrades in the middle of a mission whenever you want. So I thought that was kind of a weird choice. But mostly third-person shooter action game. It's very much mission by mission. There is some exploration in each area as well as in the hub world. You can find cash, you can find documents. Documents are useful to explain more of what's going on, the history of the Rentier Institute, the history of vampires, and all of that kind of stuff. When you're out on the mission, it's fairly linear. There is exploration to be had to find more cash and documents. The one frustrating thing is you never know if you're progressing the mission or if you're actually exploring an area. There were many times where I was trying to explore to find more cash and I ended up continuing the mission and getting locked out of the previous area. But it works like a lot of linear games. You move through a safe area into an arena type area, maybe even moving along from arena to arena there will be enemies, but it basically works like that throughout. There's a decent variety of enemies, and they start mixing and matching them more and more, as well as things that pop up as bosses at first. They'll later start showing up as tougher enemies. Not quite as hard as they were when they were bosses, but harder nonetheless. Some of the arenas felt poorly balanced, and it could get frustrating at times, but it was never so frustrating that I had a fuck this moment and just, quit. Now there's a whole thing about electricity and your gauntlet allows you to melee with vampires and familiars and creatures and all of that jazz. You being a cowboy, you've got guns, but you've also got a gauntlet. And the cool thing is, you can upgrade your guns. They get electrical things, which give them special abilities. The gauntlet has electrical stuff going on, which gains cool abilities. But like the shotgun can then send out like electrical orbs, or your revolver can like chain lightning kind of. You can also get kind of a chain lightning for the gauntlet, and the gauntlet is what allows you to really melee. But it also has other cool abilities like acting as a defensive mechanism, as well as you can like pull enemies in with electricity and then beat on them. Or you can get a supercharged move, which allows you to like warp between enemies. I think that's all pretty cool and fun. I did think it was interesting that the revolver is really, it's not a primary weapon essentially, and you don't need to really aim with it. Like, you can be aimed completely somewhere else almost, like halfway across the screen, and he'll still shoot at an enemy, just immediately kind of auto lock onto them. And actually a lot of the weapons have auto lock, like the rifle auto locks, but it's not quite a soft auto lock. It's somewhere between that and not, but it will lock on and track to an extent, but you can also manipulate it a bit, although the rifle auto lock can be a bit of a pain. There were times where I was trying to hit like a very specific thing, but there were other enemies around and it would lock onto them instead of the thing I wanted, so that could get a little frustrating at time. And it did admittedly kill me, but the checkpoints aren't horrible. Some of them are not amazingly placed. You'll have to sit through a cutscene and then go back through the fight, or several times in my case in some of the fights. But you gain a lot of weapons and abilities and upgrades throughout, so it does spice up the game as you go through, and you'll find new things that will help you. And like actually properly help you instead of, you know, playing a game where you basically use the same 3 abilities over and over and all the new stuff doesn't matter. I think they did a good job making the new stuff actually beneficial. Now let's get into the controls. And overall, I like the controls. I think they worked well. I didn't have a real problem with the aiming. Like I said, there's a lot of lock on to it. But the controls were responsive. They did what I needed them to do when I wanted them to do it. When I was pressing buttons, they were doing it. Sometimes I did get killed, but this is also one of those games because, you know, you press the attack button 3 times, you're attacking 3 times, and you're not interrupting that. There are abilities you can get that will help interrupt that, but I probably should have invested in them. Now, as for the graphics and visuals, it's a good looking game, honestly. I don't think it's the greatest looking thing I've ever seen, but it is a good looking game. The characters are very well designed. I really enjoy their outfits. I thought a lot of care and effort was put into them. I will say Jesse starts to look a little ridiculous with all the weapons you get. He starts to just look kind of silly because you just have so many fucking weapons all over him. But I think things like how the gauntlet is designed, how the weapons are designed with the electricity. Would it work? Would it be practical? I don't know. Does it look pretty fucking cool? Yes. Then you have the creatures. Not a huge variety in appearance. Like your general slugmen, I don't know what to call them. They all look the exact same. The werewolves look the exact same. There's a bit of difference in some of the familiar cowboy looking guys, but not a lot. There's like 2 or 3 of their designs. But each enemy type kind of has their own design, and that's really all it is. So you will see 3 of the exact same dude on the screen at the same time. So I guess they could have put a little bit more into that, but I still think the designs are cool, so I'm really kind of good with it. And it's a very chaotic game, so I really wasn't sitting there at the time playing it, critiquing it, being like, oh, well, I'm fighting this guy again. I wish he looked different. No, I was more like, oh shit, I gotta kill this guy again. He still looks pretty cool. As for the world, I think the world was really cool. It is very exaggerated and over the top in a lot of ways, but I think it very much works in a world where you're doing vampires. I do think they leaned a little too heavy into the color palette you would expect from like a oldie Western game. A lot of really red or orange sunsets and a lot of really orange backgrounds or dusty looking backgrounds. I think they could have done a little bit more with some of them. You do get a decent variety, snow-covered mountains, kind of foresty area. But when you're in a town, it's generally very dusty and brown or very orange due to the sunset. I just don't think they necessarily did all of the vistas the justice they could. But I think the animations and everything else, the overall design, characters, creatures, the world itself, the layout of the world, I think all of that was actually incredibly well done, and I really found it appealing. I personally didn't run into any major glitches or issues, so time to move on to the wrap-up. I gotta say, while I don't think it was a perfect game, I do think it has a few small drawbacks. Just some of the arena battles don't feel as balanced as they could, and occasionally feel a little cheap, as well as the story could be a little better put together. But overall, I actually really enjoyed it. I had just fun with this game. It was one of those games where I was just able to get in there and have fun. As of filming this video, it is currently on Game Pass, but I had bought it before that, and you know what? I don't feel bad about it. So yes, I'm comfortable recommending it at the price. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what's your favorite Western? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.